ladies, gents, and non-binary mates, and welcome back to Beauty in the Bookcase. Now, before we get started, make sure you follow me here, and right over here, so you can keep up with everything I'm doing when I'm not posting on YouTube. For today's episode, we're going to be covering the Book of Unknown Americans by Cristina Enriquez. So, Enriquez was actually born in Delaware to an American mother and a Panamanian father. A lot of her summers growing up, she did spend them in Panama. However, she didn't really know any Spanish, so, most of that time was spent with her just sort of sitting back and listening and getting to know the culture that was around her. And this, of course, then influenced a lot of her work, since Panama actually features a lot in her writing, starting with her first collection, Come Together, Fall Apart, followed by her debut novel, The World in Half, and of course, it features in the Book of Unknown Americans. This story is a tapestry of Latin America, but more importantly, it's the story of two families who collide in love, loss, and disillusionment. The book mainly focuses on Maribel's family, her parents being Alma and Arturo, after they relocate to the United States from Mexico after Maribel suffered a fall that left her with a traumatic brain injury. Now, living in the US is not easy for the Riveras. They don't speak the language, only one of them works, and even then there's this constant fear that their job is on the line, and that means their visa is too. Across from them live the Toro family, who came from Panama escaping the war. Mayor, their son, is the one who really kind of connects both of the families, as he quickly falls in love with Maribel once he meets her, and he just wants her to have a normal life despite her brain injury. This leads him to sort of taking on a protective role over her, going as far as protecting him from a local bully called Garrett, who is often harassing her and even tries to assault her. Toward the end, the novel takes a lot of turns, mostly due to miscommunications and really a lot of reckless behavior that does sadly end up in the death of Arturo. But there's still a clear message that Enriquez is really trying to get her audience to see. Now, before we get into my analysis, there are a couple of points that I do want to highlight that are critiques that I saw and that I actually did agree with, and I think it's important to, of course, bring those to light. Now, the first one is genuinely about the sense of shoehorned representation. Now, as I've just said, the story does focus on two immigrant families, one from Mexico and one from Panama. However, they do live in this apartment complex that is full of a lot of other Hispanic immigrants. The problem is that towards the middle of the novel, Enriquez starts just throwing in random chapters that introduce these characters and provide the reason why they chose to come to America. And while I do think it's incredibly important to have this representation to show that Latin America isn't just Mexico and that not every single Latin American country operates the same way, it felt kind of confusing and pointless to have these chapters dedicated to characters that really only existed in the background. I mean, aside from Quisqueya, who does play a slightly more active role in the plot, everyone else is just mostly in the background to provide the support of a community. And while I can understand why Enriquez wanted to showcase the richness and the diversity that there is in Latin America, the fact that none of their cultures are fully explored kind of makes it pointless to even have them there. Another issue I struggled with was the final chapter, in which we have Arturo post-mortem sort of just recapping his experience of living in the States. Now, this really reads like a love letter to America, in which Arturo reflects on all the hardships that he went through, but how they were still part of his American dream and how he, in his own way, achieved an American dream. And while I absolutely understand that that could be, and while I definitely understand why he would have felt, of course, lucky enough to have come to America, because it did provide his daughter with treatment that he wouldn't have been able to perhaps access, or at least not have the same quality back in Mexico, it almost felt a little frustrating that he didn't see anything wrong or provide any critiques about his experience. I mean, he had a really hard time both with work and, of course, ends up losing his life. So there were a variety of things that obviously did impact his life in America. And I don't think that he needed to, of course, be resentful of it or blame America for it. But I think it would have felt a little bit more genuine if he could have taken the time to reflect on those hardships and be like, but despite this, the experience meant something to him. It just seemed a little odd to only point out the positives and treat it as if immigrants who come here, even when they struggle, are expected to and are supposed to be grateful to even be here, even if that means that they're constantly living in subhuman conditions or experiencing challenges and constantly fearing for the stability of their lives. Another critique I saw a lot was actually about the slightly problematic nature of Mayor's relationship with Maribel. I mean, sure, it's absolutely lovely that he wanted her to feel just like every other kid. It was great for Maribel, and it helped her progress, as you can see throughout the book. However, Mayor didn't really allow for a lot of room for Maribel to have agency over what was happening to her. He often made reckless decisions that, sure, normal teenagers skip school and all that, but taking her out of her special education school without letting her parents know and kind of going on this grand adventure where a lot of dangerous things could have happened was absolutely stupid, and coupled with the fact that anytime he kissed her or had any type of advance towards her, sure, she didn't stop him, but we don't know to what extent she was comfortable with that. And we never do, because we never get to hear from her. Which brings me to my last point. For a story that is so focused on this one character and her journey, we never hear from Maribel. We hear about her from everybody else, but she never gets the chance to be front and center. I think the author really missed the chance to actually end the book with her perspective. I think instead of having this random post-mortem chapter where Arturo thanked his lucky stars for his opportunity to come to America, we should have had Maribel step into the spotlight and reflect on what happened to her, especially because at the end, she and her mother are going back to Mexico. So it would have been great to maybe skip forward in time a bit and, see how her time in America impacted her improvement and how her life has continued to go. It would have been wonderful to have an opportunity to have her be grateful for her parents' sacrifices and even value her relationship with Mayor, but it just never happens. And it's crazy because despite her TBI, a lot of the moments that she does have with Mayor, we can tell that there is a lot going on in her head and that she is appreciative of their relationship. But again, we don't get a single glimpse into her head, so it makes no sense to have a story so centered around protecting this girl and seeing her get better. I mean, that is the driving force for her parents coming to America, and then we just never get to hear from her. But with that said, let's get into the actual analysis. So one of the main topics of this story is identity. So a large part of the reason why our characters feel so unknown is because they're kind of in this in-between state. They no longer belong to their home country. And for those who have been outside of their country for longer than the Riveras, they do feel a disconnect to their home. But the problem is they don't entirely feel connected to American culture either. They're neither where they're originally from, nor are they full-fledged Americans. They often struggle with connecting and preserving those traditions that they brought with them from their native countries, while also feeling the need to adapt to America as the only way to survive. It's really interesting to get to see these characters and how at home and comfortable they feel in the little apartment block that they've created and that they've made this sort of like epicenter for Latinos in Delaware. But then it's also interesting to contrast that to how disconnected and how out of reach most known Americans feel to them. Their happiest moments in the States are very much tied to being in that apartment complex with that group of people surrounding them, with that support system. There's a level of safety that they feel between each other and a level of support that they don't seem to really that does not seem to really extend beyond that complex, right? Whenever a problem occurs, their first thought isn't to go to the authorities or maybe other avenues that known Americans would go to, but instead to rely on each other. Because their identities are now very much tied to that complex and the relationship that they all have with each other. So the American dream is another thing that plays a huge role in this story. And although it constantly seems out of reach for them, Arturo is always trying to get to it, and he's not really giving up on that desire. It really doesn't seem like this book believes in the American dream, at least not anymore. Or perhaps it exists here to show that the American dream would not be possible for most Americans if it wasn't for the unknown Americans who will never be able to reach that goal. I mean, these characters are struggling just to make ends meet, just to keep their papers, just to help their families, and that doesn't really sound like the American dream at all. Sure, their living conditions might be better than what they left behind, but they also miss their families, and they don't have that support or those resources anymore. The American dream then becomes not only this unattainable goal for them, but instead their original dreams are kind of squashed and replaced, which I actually wasn't crazy about either. I mean, part of the reason why all of these other background characters are showcased is to show how and why they came to America, and a lot of it has to do with them losing their original dreams or having come to America and not attained what they originally came for. And it was just upsetting that not a single one of these characters actually made it, right? None of them actually got to do what they set out to do. And the reason I really didn't like this is because it does paint this idea that the American dream is exclusively for Americans and it's not made for anyone else, and anyone coming to America as an immigrant then has to just give up on their dreams and pick a new one, a more attainable one. And sure, of course, I'm not saying that every single dream is supposed to come true or anything like that. Obviously, that's not how the world works. And I think it would have been fine if we did have some of the characters have to adapt their dreams, but the fact that nobody really seems to get anything that they sacrifice their entire lives to come to America to do is really upsetting, because again, it just kind of makes it sound like you should just be happy and lucky that you get to live in America, even if you don't get to live your dreams and even if things are just not great. And I think that's not really an intentional message, but it did kind of frustrate me personally. And the last theme that I want to discuss for today is the topic of loss. Now, of course, loss plays an important role, not only in the loss of Arturo's life, but also the fact that the story starts out with loss. You know, we have Maribel losing her memory. Their constant concern about losing their visa is also there. Not to mention the loss of innocence, the loss of dreams. It does constantly seem to be a topic that comes up over and over and over again. I mean, even unintentionally, the book deals with loss as we have Maribel losing her agency, as well as her parents losing hope of her recovering. I mean, even her parents have to struggle with the idea of losing the daughter they once knew and having to realize that perhaps there's just going to be a new daughter and they're never going to get their original daughter back. And on top of that, we have the loss of their identities and the loss of the old lives that they did live in their original countries, which really does end up being a really beautiful exploration of the hardships and the sadness that comes with being an immigrant. I mean, even on a smaller scale, Maribel and Mayor do have to face the loss of their relationship and the potential that could have had when she has to move back to Mexico. And while it obviously feels minor compared to a lot of the other losses that are suffered throughout the book, I think it's important to remember that, you know, when you're a teenager, you experience emotions much more intensely. And for them, that must have been a huge blow, not just on the romantic front for both of them, but because think whatever you think about his relationship with Maribel, it was obvious that his presence in her life was helping her improve. And now that is lost, and we don't ever get to really know how she copes with both losing her father and then losing this person who is taking such an important role in her life and helping her feel so much better and so much at ease after such a traumatic situation happened to her. So what's it all about? At its core, I think the Book of Unknown Americans is the tale of loss that so many immigrants have to face when they come to the States pursuing the American dream. It's a reality check that the American dream is not achievable for everyone, and perhaps it's just not achievable at all anymore. You know, despite its pitfalls, I think this is still such an important read that because it does detail a lot of the pain and the sadness that comes with having to uproot your life and start over somewhere else where you don't know anyone. And I think that's a really important part that is often overlooked when we talk about immigration. So what did you guys think about this book? Make sure you leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Also, make sure to leave a like if you like this video and subscribe for more videos like these. And lastly, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload next. Next week, I am going to be trying to learn Simlish, which if you don't know what Simlish is, it's the made-up language from The Sims. So that should be an absolute train wreck. So make sure to tune in for that, and I will see you guys next time.